and very lonely. And uh, it's easier to not deal with our demons sometimes. Sometimes it's easier to shove them down. And so I try to present it in a way that doesn't feel so scary, that feels silly. And the message is so important.
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego Dodo, and before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
What initially drew you to social media in a way of I would say that sending a message of positive vibes and self-acceptance?
I think it didn't start as positive vibes and self-acceptance. I was posting online because I felt like I had nothing else to do. It was during the pandemic and I was at home and I had lost my job and I was going through a really terrible depression, and I started posting about it. But the more I posted about it, the more I just knew people were responding in a way where they just needed to know they weren't alone. So it kind of morphed into positivity as I changed my life through this process of sharing my healing journey. I myself, like, my life also turned more positive. And so they kind of went hand in hand. It wasn't so much that I chose to do this. It was that this is what it turned into.
And before social media, would you say that you really was taking care of your mental well-being?
No, not at all. So I started my mental health journey when I was 19, and I was in an inpatient treatment facility, and, that was where I learned that I had depression and that I was, suffering from all of these things. And I learned some skills and some coping skills and some things, but I really didn't put them into practice because I was still so young. So when I left there, I kind of just went right back to hustle and work and go to get a job, get a career. And I was a huge workaholic. I worked 80 hours a week. I was not putting myself first at all. And it was kind of being forced into that by the pandemic, where I was forced to be home, where I kind of was finally forced to slow down and look at my life and, recognize that I hadn't put myself first and I didn't even know if I liked my life. And so I had to go through and sort of decode that and pick through where I was at and kind of pick myself up and pick up the pieces and put them back together by taking care of my mental health.
And definitely putting yourself first is something that most of us actually, myself struggle with, and definitely the audience are struggling with or struggle with, because we think that we are good Samaritans. We actually do this thing for other people, and that it falls under doing the right thing, doing the good thing, and classify it under being a good person, not realizing it that you can't actually try to help other people without helping yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a trend that I myself have seen within myself. And so when it comes to social media, and it's something that one actually realized to actually, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. The reason why I'm actually saying that sometimes can be negative when it comes to social media. When you open up with people and you actually become this villain of saying that, what do you know in people saying that? And things like bad comments towards that. Have you ever received any bad comments when you actually share that?
Yes. People, the thing about mental health and the thing about talking about taking care of yourself and putting yourself first, is that people aren't always ready to hear that yet. In your personal mental health journey, if you're not at a point where you know that it's okay for you to come first and that it's not selfish to put yourself first, then that's a really hard thing to hear. And people also, because I came from just really hustling and really overworking myself and running myself into the ground and burning myself out. And now I kind of am the anti-burnout. People really perceive that as lazy. And so a lot of that, my negative comments are a lot of times about like being lazy and not caring about, stuff, but it's not that at all. It's that I do care about myself enough to take the time to slow down and put myself first and take care of myself. But if people aren't there yet, and it's hard to believe, and it's easier to fight back than to say maybe she's right.
And definitely seen on the conversation of social media, and I've seen, and as much as we speak about mental health, it's something that people that don't usually listen to. And not only just a random person, but also when it comes to celebrities speaking about it. And I'm someone that is quite big in terms of podcasts, in terms of listening to podcasts, and also actually want to be updated. Especially in the States. In the States, I believe that there's a huge problem when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
As much as it's this generation, my generation has accepted the fact that there's this thing called mental health and they want to take care of themselves. But at the same time, there is a huge suicide rate towards them. And people, and it's quite very alarming, because the reason I'm saying this is the fact that I recently seen an episode on The Diary of a CEO, whereas Stephen Bartlett invited Trevor Noah, and he actually spoke about his issues with mental health. And he has been telling that story for a couple of years now. But to me, it seems like enough people are not listening, and they don't actually want to actually better their mental health. So can you walk us through the time that you realize that you accept yourself through self-acceptance?
Well, it's an everyday struggle, I would say, for sure. I've had a lot of trouble. It really, you know what? It was this moment that was kind of confusing for me, because I was not working a ton. I was not going above and beyond. I was not in this hustle culture. I was not working side gigs and trying to take over the world. And it was when I was quiet and still and relaxing and taking care of myself and making that my focus, I was so much more content with me than than I had been. I don't even think I had considered myself. And I think that was very surprising, that the way I felt about myself, I saw myself in a more positive light when I was taking care of myself. Like it all went hand in hand almost. Like the second I prioritized me, I also liked me better and had more admiration for myself. And I always thought that I would feel like I was better if I was working hard and producing a lot and making a lot of money and doing all of these things. But none of those things ever made me happy in the way that putting my mental health first and knowing that all I had to be was here. There wasn't, I didn't have to do X, Y, and Z to be worthy of my own love and affection. I just had to be there with myself. And if you take care of your mental health and you take care of yourself first, I think the rest starts to fall in line, but you wouldn't know that until you stop to do it. And, this world, the way that society's running right now, especially in the US, you're not supposed to have time. If you have free time, you're supposed to fill it with doing more. And, once you get out of that mindset and realize I don't have to do more, people, I'm still worthy of love and affection and respect when I'm doing less, and just being a human being. I don't know. And I think there's so much pressure from society to be something, and all you have to be is alive.
Definitely. And it's something that I myself struggle with in terms of being me. And being you is something that people would say that you're boring, and I've been in that stage of actually I've been speaking about mental health for now around, it has been 4 years. It's been 4 years doing this podcast, trying by any means to actually reach people and help them through some tips actually inviting people like you and people that will actually share their stories. And in all honesty, it has been easy, and definitely learning something that being able to myself actually tell my story. Whereas when I have a guest, for example, yesterday I was talking about suicide and had a guest, Kevin. He lost his son through suicide, and I found myself being in the shoes of someone that was part of that, of having those suicide ideations, not knowing what to actually do to move on, and find myself tearing up within the conversation. And I realized that sometimes we tell ourselves that we have accepted ourselves, not realizing that we haven't.
Yeah.
We just touch a little bit of the surface, and realizing that we need to do more work towards ourselves. And that's the purpose of this podcast, being able not only the audience, not the guest to be vulnerable, but myself to be vulnerable, so that people can actually see that.
Yeah. Whatever. Every story needs to be heard, and it's finding the person who needs to hear it. People will ask me, how do you be vulnerable? How do you come out and tell people how you're feeling and what you're going through? And I always say, and this will be good for your podcast too, that we are not as unique as we think we are. Anything that you're feeling, somebody else is feeling. Anything that I'm feeling, somebody else is feeling. And we feel lonely when we think we're the only ones feeling a certain way. And that, that definitely doesn't help especially with suicidal ideation and not wanting to be a part of your own life. But that sharing is really brave, and vulnerability, it saves lives. So what you're doing is really important. It's important for people to talk about how they feel, and because it can be so isolating for somebody who thinks they're alone in the way they feel. And the
Mm,
more people you talk to, and the more people whose stories you get, and the more people
mm,
who share, where they're at in their mental health journey, the more people that can relate to that and hold on to that and know that they're not alone.
mm. And something that you spoke about is that thing of not actually doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it plays a huge role, and where you in that place of isolation and you don't have anything to do and
Mm-hmm.
you are with yourself and your thoughts. And I feel like that's where it becomes more dangerous when it comes to mental well-being,
Yeah.
because you think, again, speaking about those suicide ideations, not actually knowing what the right thing to do, and not actually having that thing to distract you, because sometimes we don't want to actually face our emotions. We don't want to face our fears. We don't want to face our demons. We actually want that distraction just to actually, in a way of, for example, sometimes it can be work. Sometimes it can be other things like drugs and alcohol. Not knowing that, oh flip, if I keep on doing this, what am I going to actually? How am I going to eradicate this type of, I would say that, this type of behavior? Because those behaviors, it's something that we see every day, and people actually don't talk about it because they're ashamed
Mm-hmm.
of, in terms of when it comes to drugs and alcohol addictions, because they're afraid that people will actually judge them in a way. And
Yeah.
going back to your story, and did see some videos of yours on TikTok, and did or found them funny, and what made you take that approach of
uh,
actually adding humor on it?
it's kind of what you just said. This stuff is very heavy and very lonely, and it's easier to not deal with our demons sometimes. Sometimes it's easier to shove them down. And so I try to present it in a way that doesn't feel so scary, that feels silly. And the message is so important, and I know how hard it is to hear those messages, right? Because like you said, it's shameful. We feel ashamed of these feelings, or we feel ashamed that we can't keep up, or that we have these struggles, or these addictions, or just mental health struggles, or life struggles. And it can feel embarrassing, and it can feel like you're the only one going through it. And so I present it in a funny, theatrical way, because
Mm,
not to hide it, but to make it digestible, to make it easier to hear, to wrap it in a nice package and say, I'm going to help you, but it's going to make you laugh at the same time,
mm,
because it is so hard to hear hard things. And so I say the hard things, but I say them in a in a happy way.
mm, mm. And definitely, there are so many trends online, and having 700K followers is something, and on TikTok is something, and being able to actually not, sometimes our content creation is demanded by the audience, by
Mm-hmm.
our followers. And how do you actually make sure that you listen to the audience, and at the same time stay authentic enough that it's part of you,
I
the content
think,
that you.
yeah, I think something that helps a lot is that the content that I'm creating is very honest. I I never lie about where I'm at. I never lie about who I am or how I'm feeling. And because I've set it up that way, everybody knows that I have to respect my own boundaries. That if I'm feeling very depressed and I need space, that I have to give myself space. And I'm very lucky that I've set up this community around my content where I will find myself apologizing for taking a week off and saying, I'm so sorry, I haven't been here. But I will get comments from people saying like, no, you're practicing what you preach because this is what you're telling us all the time, that we have to take care of ourselves and that we have to put ourselves first. And it's just as important for me to actually do that when it comes to being online.
And definitely, and try by any means to actually be authentic. Sometimes it might quite be hard and you find yourself in a place of flip. Should I do it? And should I do not do it? I myself as a vlogger, and I try by any means to create content, but haven't created content for the longest time because sometimes I do a video and say, nah, I'm not gonna post it. Probably sense of editing, things like that. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love editing, but sometimes it can just be a drag. And imagine doing this podcast, having to do everything and again doing the vlogs. To me, it's sometimes quite hard. And
you have to take care of yourself too.
Exactly. Something like that. Sometimes we actually, again, one of those distractions work and keep working, not taking care of yourself. And and you keep asking yourself, why are you so sad? Why are you so depressed? Why you don't have this kind of energy? Not realizing that you're not taking care of yourself, which is the first thing to do. And to be honest with you, I myself am guilty of that, even though I've been talking about mental health, but sometimes it's easier to work than working on yourself.
Yeah,
because
it is.
It's something that I realized, and I just want to move on to your book.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
Yeah.
Walk us through that. Why did you realize that you have to write this book?
So in the book is very similar to what I'm doing online, and it was kind of just wanting to have it like in a physical form and be able people to be able to, especially when I'm not feeling up to creating content, they have me in a book and they can flip to any page at any time when they need just a little bit of affirmation, a little bit of reminder that they're okay, that it's okay to be who they are. It's okay to slow down and put yourself first and all of these things. So it was kind of, and it's colorful. It was just, I wanted it to live somewhere in case the content ends or whatever. You know, it's all here in a book and it's transcribed and illustrated. And it's not quite self-help because it is so silly. But it does help. And I read it and I will flip to pages and you're like, I can't believe I said that, because depending on where you're at mentally, it all hits differently. And I just like having the whole thing to look at.
Definitely. But sometimes we need to ask ourselves that what classifies as a self-help book. Because
right.
I believe that that's the fact. And sometimes you can come to a book. I'm someone that really reads people like your Franz Kafka, your Fyodor Dostoevsky, your Friedrich Nietzsche, your philosophers actually. Yeah, with this deep stuff and find myself actually improving myself and actually asking myself those things. But yeah, for example, actually it is something funny. It's something that will actually give you that thing of flip. I'm
Yeah,
feeling
I
better
think,
now.
yeah, because the messages are the same, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Me and every philosopher, we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying it
Mm.
with rainbows and hearts.
Definitely, definitely. And on top of that, how do you actually eliminate those suicidal expectations and actually focus on, I would say that in a positive way, because sometimes we listen to what society wants us to do, and once we do those things, we actually become happier and stop putting ourselves first.
Yeah. Well, for me, like, first of all, you have to acknowledge that it's a thought that people have and it's a thought that I have. And for me, the thought is when I'm thinking it would be a lot easier to not have to be here. That's my first sign that I'm not doing well. Is the second I'm like, I would rather not be here. I would rather not be a part of my own life. Uh,
Mm,
that's where I need to take a long, hard look at what's going on. And it's really,
mm,
really hard, but always asking for help is important. If you can't ask for help, looking for help online.
mm,
And for me, that's what I do because I am a little bit scared to ask in the real world and to call somebody up. But now we have the internet at our fingertips, and it is kind of, like my content exists for something like that, for people who don't know what to do, who don't know who to reach out to, who don't know who to
mm,
ask for help. And I think, people say the internet's bad, but I know that it's good. Because there are so many people online doing wonderful things and talking about
mm,
important things and talking about getting out of those dark places. And I think that's really a really good first step to knowing at least that you're not
mm,
alone and to knowing that it feels like you're in this hole that you can't get out of. And maybe you just need to sit there for a moment, but you will get out.
definitely. Eventually, at the end of the day, you will get out, and you're someone that really is. I would say that someone is out there, someone that actually, due to your social media influence and something that I saw, and which is TEDx, and just
Yeah,
want to speak about that. And how did you find yourself being a TEDx speaker?
that's a good question. Somebody messaged me on Instagram and said, I think you should apply for TEDx. And I said,
Mm,
oh, what? And they said, I think you have a lot to say. And I was like, well, okay. So I applied and I literally got an email the next day saying I got to do a talk. And, it was, uh, it was hard because my content is so funny and so silly to have to
mm,
write it out in a very no nonsense way and kind of tell my story. Um, it was a good challenge for me, but yeah, I did a talk about letting go of the to-do list, the checklist, of society's expectations and, throw away the boxes that you've tried to fit in and who are you without the checklist and who are you without the boxes you've tried to fit in and who are you outside of
mm,
all of that? Who would you want to be if you didn't know who you thought you should be? Who would you be? Who would
mm,
you
mm, mm, mm,
couldn't hear the outside influence? Who would you be and who would you want to be?
And for someone that recently was part of TEDx, I wasn't the speaker, but I was actually volunteering on in terms of helping, and I saw how people present themselves and realize, oh flip, this thing is interesting, and being able to put yourself in the stage and actually tell your story. It's something touching, because I remember one of the women that is doing a important job, and because in the side of skills, and she quit her job and started a business. When it comes to the name of the company is African Skills. So, and where she's told her story, she cried, and it was my first time seeing someone in TED Talk that's so emotional. It really shows that people out there want to do the change, want to actually see people actually strive, and I saw it as an opportunity for me to actually improve myself also, being able to have the sense of agency and being there for people that actually don't believe in themselves, to people that actually aren't aware of the stigma around mental health. It's surprising that sometimes, to me, it's surprising that people don't talk about mental health, and asking myself why.
Yeah, the other thing that people don't celebrate enough is just being here. There's this stigma around participation trophies. You know what I mean? About like, everybody wants a participation trophy. Nobody wants to work hard. And I think we should all get participation trophies for showing up and living our lives. Because the people who are struggling, and the people who think it would be easier, to commit suicide, the people who think it would be easier to be dead, what if every day of their life somebody had said, I'm so proud of you for waking up today and choosing to be a part of this world and choosing to participate in life. And, I think it's okay to celebrate the tiniest things. I think it's okay to celebrate getting out of bed, and I think it's okay to celebrate brushing your teeth, and we're all at different levels. People who are struggling don't feel like they deserve a prize for brushing their teeth, but I know how hard that struggle is. I know when I'm struggling mentally, how hard it is to change my clothes, how hard it is to drink water, to show up. And I think an important part of talking about mental health is talking about cheering people on for the little things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And doing those small wins, actually celebrating those small wins, it's quite something that it's quite important. And sometimes for example, look at myself, being able to do this for 4 years consistently, and it was something that was quite easy. Consistency, it's key, and it's something that is very hard to do unless you have discipline to do it. And I myself missed lots of days, whereas I should have released a podcast, but couldn't, because I felt like, nah, why should I release today? And didn't even have that pressure, but until I told myself that you wanted this and you wanted to change people's lives, and remember that you're not only doing this for you, but you also do this for other people, and realize, let me continue.
But you still have to do it for you too.
Yes.
Good balance.
Finding that balance, I feel like that's the main point of you actually doing this for you. And someone that didn't subscribe to therapy and didn't actually understand it, why should I go to therapy? I realized that speaking with one person that actually encouraged me doing so is Solomon, one of the criteria, I would say, good people that I've met, have a pleasure on meeting on the podcast, and he is a therapist, and realized that, this thing is important. This thing of actually taking care of your feelings and how much important is the feelings really gave me that thing of I need to actually take care of myself. I need to actually be more within my emotions. Just because I'm within my emotions, but that doesn't make me weak. And there's the perception that young men, or most young men have, is the fact that you think you're within your feelings. People will use you. People will take advantage of you. Yes, people will take advantage of you as long as you know that you're doing for the right thing. As long as you actually know yourself and you love yourself enough. So, yeah, I just wanted to actually add on that through our conversation.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad. I like to hear that you know that you don't always just do it because you have to. You have to still put yourself first, even if it's a self-made job. If I think the entire world will run smoother. I think we would all be happier if we all recognize our limits.
Stop having the perception that we don't have limits and realize that, oh flip, I have this limit. So, and it's in a way of, I need to take care of my mental well-being. And when we actually stumble upon a wall and realize that we have limits, we become so depressed, and instead of focusing on ourselves, we focus on that wall of how can I get rid of this wall? Actually, not actually looking within yourself and realize that, okay, I've fallen. What's the next step? Or taking care of yourself, doing meditation, journaling, things like that. Things that have been suggested a lot by a lot of the audience. And so not audience, guest. And I want to speak onto your mental health comedy tour. Right? Something that is quite fascinating. And
yeah.
it's quite fascinating. And your mental health comedy tour has reached audiences across 16 states, blending humor and heartfelt advice. How do you use comedy to engage people on serious topics like burnout and anxiety?
Well, mostly I use comedy to lure them into the show, and then then they come to the show and they leave crying because it was so touching and heartfelt. But it is the first 15 minutes of my show are very funny, but then it really does it in a very organic way, in a way that doesn't feel forced. Also, kind of make you take a look at your life and the way that you take care of yourself. And I frame it as comedy storytelling because I tell my life story and my journey because I was anorexic for a very long time, and then I talk a lot about just the pressures, societal pressures of looking a certain way, acting a certain way, having to live your life in that correct order, and the way that each one of those things made me feel, and how detrimental it was to myself, and then how did I get out of that? And I mean, humor has saved my life, so it makes sense that humor is the way that I would bring that story to the world too. It's that easy to accept package because it makes you laugh while still making you think hard about the way you treat yourself.
And humor, and it's something that I believe myself developed at a young age, because I was someone that was always bubbly, always laughing, have a bigger laughter. I'm someone that really laughs. When I say laugh, I laugh. And even when I laugh, one would actually know that there's a second day in the room and point in my life. And realizing that it was important for me to be in that way, realize that if I don't make myself happy, no one will. And has been my philosophy ever since. And never allowed myself to be that sad. But there's a dark side towards that. You are someone that actually makes other people laugh. Yes, you don't put yourself first, but whenever you are alone, you have these different thoughts of saying that I'm miserable, I am depressed, I don't know what to do. And it's something that I'm currently working on. Try not to actually invite those negative thoughts within me and realize that, oh, flip, it's fine.
Or just talking about them. Sometimes I think it helps to just say that. Say, I'm miserable and I'm very depressed and I'm doing very bad when I am, and saying it and putting it out there so that it's out there and I don't have to hold it all to myself. I think there's a lot of power in releasing things too. It's just like journaling, but I think saying it out loud or telling somebody and saying it that matter-of-factly and straightforward too is I think there needs to be more of that. I think if we all could do that and say, hey, I'm in a very bad place. I just wanted to let you know.
And sometimes you become so ashamed about that. And it's something that myself have been trying to being able to allow people within that side of emotions, try to actually let them know, okay, flip, I'm feeling this type of way. And it has, I don't want to lie and say that it has been easy to do such. It has been hard. And being able to try your best sometimes quite difficult because you feel like there's no one that is for you. As much as you might have many friends, there's this thing of saying that, oh, flip, no one is there for me. No one is there to actually listen to my story, listen to my pain, and feel remorseful for me. And that's where I believe that's where you need to show up for yourself and show up in a way of saying that I've got this and I will prevail and I will actually learn to actually take that thing of letting people know how I am feeling. Things like that. That's something that I've seen within myself and within my peers.
Yeah. And some of the fear of that. So the fear of, if I tell them I'm struggling, what if they say to suck it up? And I'd say that that's maybe not the person to have in your corner. It's also a good indicator of the community you're surrounding yourself with. I always say, like, why are you trying so hard to fit into this room where you have to change who you are and the way you feel when there is probably another room that wants you right where you're at?
And I'm quite seeing the time, and unfortunately we almost out of time.
Yeah.
And through our conversation, what would you like the audience to actually learn from our conversation to what we've spoken about?
There is no shame in struggling. Life is really hard.
And I feel like it's something that's quite, I believe, resonate with the audience, and not all my audience, but also your audience. And again, thanks so much for that, and realize that there's no shame in struggling, and try to better ourselves. And to people that might actually interested in your book, might be interested in your in your content, might interested learning more about you, where can they reach you?
Yeah, I'm at AKPRZY on all socials, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads, all of it. It's at AKPRZY. And then my book and all of that is for sale at akprzy.com.
Definitely will add those links on the description of this episode so that it's easier for the audience to actually get you. And again, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed my time with you, and definitely really love to really enjoyed having this conversation with you in a way of perspective when it comes to mental health. And I believe that we need to actually hear other people's perspective and realize that just because we think this certain way, that doesn't mean that it's right. And you need to actually hear other person's perspective. And again, thank you so much for being here.